Hi everyone, and welcome to another edition of the REFSIX Weekly. Today we've got a lot to talk about, and really pleased to have my co-host John with me.
Hello.
And we've got Matt Leary. Matt, do you want to give yourself an intro?
Yes, I'm a level 5 referee from Surrey, and I mainly referee on the women's game, so the Greater London Women's Football League, and sometimes do FA Women's National League.
Brilliant. And Max?
Hi there, Max Ashley, level 7 from Hampshire. I referee in the Bournemouth Divisional District leagues, as well as assistant referee on the Wessex League, as well as some academy games.
Brilliant. So this is the first time, well, for a while that we haven't had a load of Sussex-based referees. So thanks for being part. We are still Southern, so Northern referees, if you want to come on, give us a shout. But we're slowly branching out, which is great. Just wanted to share some news to start with. So the second round of the FA Cup happened this weekend. Did you guys watch any of it?
I saw the highlights of, I can't remember what the name of the team, but the lowest ranked team scoring a last minute winner against, I think it was Havant and Waterlooville. So those sort of David versus Goliath stories just make what the FA Cup is all about. And congratulations to that team.
It was Marine FC, and now, so the hilarious thing is you mentioned David versus Goliath. That was against Havant and Waterlooville. So what has happened now is the draw happened last night, and they've managed to pick up a home tie against Spurs in January. So
Wow.
It's the biggest difference in terms of league positions that's ever happened in an FA Cup tie. There's 169 places between them at the moment in the tables, and they play in step 4 in the Northern Premier League Division 1 Northwest Division. So it's a pretty crazy tie for them. Hopefully they can get some fans in the stadium to make some money. And I've heard already the Spurs fans are putting together like a GoFundMe to enable them to make even more money from that. So what an amazing draw. I couldn't believe it.
I mean, that will be something that the players and the coaches can dine on, that story where, they played against Spurs in the third round of the FA Cup at home. Chances are it will be obviously a live TV game as well. So, yeah, great.
Yeah, brilliant. And so, yeah, I can't wait for that. And whoever gets to referee that will have a great occasion, I'm sure. Two news from the Champions League. So, again, I don't know if you've seen, but the female referee, Stephanie Frappart, has basically had the 2 years of incredible appointments. So she managed to get the Women's World Cup final in France. She then refereed the Men's UEFA Super Cup last year. And this season, she's just kicking on. So she's done a Men's Europa League match. She's done a UEFA Nations League. And this week, she'll become the first female to referee in the Champions League when she takes Juventus versus Kiev. So pretty incredible 2 years for her. And that's just built on the many years of foundation work that she's put in before that to get to where she has. But incredible. And the last piece of news, again from the Champions League, is Ovio Hatagan, a Romanian referee, becomes the first referee to be appointed in 5 Champions League match days in a row. So in the group stages, no one's ever done that. He'll referee Shakhtar Donetsk against Real Madrid this week. And could potentially then become the first person to get all 6 if he gets another appointment in the next round. So that's a pretty incredible feat for the Romanian referee. So brilliant. So that's the news. Did you guys watch much of the football this weekend in terms of Premier League or any games that stand out for you?
I watched the Liverpool game. Being a Liverpool fan. And then I decided not to watch TV for the rest of the day.
Fair enough.
Yeah.
I had a great weekend. It always puts me in a great mood. Early kickoff, so whether that be a Friday night or early Saturday, can make or break your weekend, right? So, if your team wins, you have a great weekend. And if your team loses, you just had the worst weekend ever. Newcastle played on Friday. No kind of VAR, no real football played actually for 89 minutes until 2 goals right at the end. And we did a smash and grab, but yeah, that was great. Any games that you guys watched, Max?
Yeah, I'm a Reading fan, so I watched the Reading game against Bristol. So that was a good game in the Championship. And actually, we don't have VAR in the Championship, so we still have that element of how it used to be, how football used to be. Controversy. So,
what we're used to, basically.
Yeah, what everyone's used to and what we're used to as referees. So, yeah, that was a good game, and I was hoping that the Chelsea-Tottenham game would have had a few goals as well, but that wasn't to be. And then obviously I actually watched the first half of the Arsenal-Wolves game as well, which Wolves played really well in the first half.
Yeah, brilliant. Matt, did you have any chance to watch the game?
No, I've seen bits and pieces of various Premier League incidents over the weekend. Yeah, not really much that I've caught, to be honest.
Well, we're going to talk on two incidents, one that happened in the Champions League last week and one from that Arsenal-Wolves game. So we'll start with the Champions League. It was Inter Milan at home against Real Madrid, and there was a penalty decision for Anthony Taylor to make in the first half, whereby Vidal has gone through and felt he'd been clipped and decided to remonstrate with Anthony Taylor. So the video we shared on Twitter that got a ton of engagement was basically Vidal going up to Anthony Taylor, remonstrating, receiving a yellow card, assumingly for dissent. And the second after, Vidal has basically pushed his chest out and gone face to face with Anthony Taylor, remonstrated even more. And Anthony Taylor made the decision to give Vidal a second yellow for basically within the same kind of time frame, and a red. So yeah, we want to talk about that specific decision, but also a little bit further out on what is dissent, how do you manage dissent in games. So just specifically on that decision, John, I'm pretty confident you were a big fan of what you saw on this.
Yeah, huge fan. It's something we don't see a lot in the professional game, especially at that level. We all know what it's for as referees. Like, we know that he's obviously overstepped the mark. Slightly harder to sell to the TV.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'm a big fan of it. I think footballers are like taking the mick a little bit about, like, you can hear it now, can't you? If there's no crowd noises, you can hear what they're saying.
Yeah.
And I think they do get away with quite a bit. So it was quite refreshing to see, actually.
Brilliant. Matt, any difference of opinion, or were you applauding?
No, I mean, it's disappointing that you see players behave like, especially when, Champions League, it's a claim for a penalty. So, of course, VAR will automatically check it. And you just think that the players should know that by now anyway. But the way that, firstly, Vidal has approached Anthony Taylor is just not acceptable on a general level. And you can clearly see Anthony Taylor saying, calm down, back off. He's clearly giving him every opportunity to walk away from the situation. He's not recognised it, so Anthony has rightly cautioned him for dissent. And then he's not much in the way of force, but he's barged him. He's squared up to him. And it's just, any league anywhere in the world, if you do that, having just been booked, you're going to give the match officials no option. So I completely agree with what Anthony Taylor has done. And hopefully, yes, it was probably just a rush of blood at the moment. And hopefully Vidal, when he sits down and calms down and he looks at it, he'll think, yeah, I shouldn't have done that.
Yeah. Max, same?
Yeah, I 100% agree. And actually, if you listen to the commentators, even afterwards, they were saying that Vidal acted like a child. And you can see him go down the tunnel and he punched the wall and he took his boots off. And it's not acceptable. And also the other thing I saw was a lot of the Inter players were crowding around Anthony Taylor as well. So I think they had six of them. And I know Ashley Young was touching him and everything, trying to tell him not. And I know certainly the FA, you have the failure to control your players. So I don't know if UEFA have something similar as well about that. But the Vidal incident was just, it was funny to watch, and I'm glad Anthony Taylor did do it, because not just as referees, but even online on social media and referee forums and things, everybody's saying the same thing, that Vidal was stupid and the referee was correct. So it's nice for once that people are praising the referee.
Yeah. So I completely agree with everything that Anthony Taylor did in this incident, I thought it was great to, like John said, demonstrate that, that doesn't get go unpunished at the elite level, which is great. I want to play devil's advocate because I feel like it's always good to have difference of opinion. I'm not saying I agree with Anthony Taylor, but I want to kind of throw a spanner in the works and see if you think it would change anything. But so we've talked about flash cards a lot on our podcast and how potentially dangerous they can be. In this scenario, if that first yellow was administered in a way where Vidal was isolated and potentially with the captain, and it was a little bit slower, do you think that second yellow could have been prevented by doing that? Again, devil's advocate, I just want to throw it out there. It's not Anthony Taylor's responsibility to do necessarily to try and prevent the second yellow, but I'm just wondering, I was just playing it in my head. Max, do you have an idea?
Yeah, I mean, quite possibly. Cause the other thing to remember is the game at this point, the challenge on Vidal, there was a very much similar challenge to what Real Madrid got a penalty for.
Yeah.
And actually the Inter challenge, they did get more of the ball, and I don't think it was a penalty. So I agree with the official then. And I think at the time, Anthony Taylor managed it as best he could. But you're right, at probably the non-elite level, we would have maybe done it slightly different, whether rightly or wrongly. But, we don't have as many powers, restrictions, televisions, VAR reviews. So we have to manage it the best way we could. So probably, we may have, brought the captain over or isolated the situation, calmed it down a bit rather than that. But then at the time, I think Anthony Taylor did well because he had also 6 other Inter players around him. And I think he had the feeling of the temperature of the game.
Yep.
And I think at the time, I think he made the right decision and the right call. But, maybe the non-elite level, it might have been took a brave referee to do what he did. We might have slightly done it a bit differently, rightly or wrongly.
John, I see you nodding. What do you?
Yeah, I agree. I think it's all process, isn't it? Like we say, at the non-elite level, cards for dissent are quite common. We obviously have the sin bin rule that was brought in to help with dissent a couple of years back. And obviously we develop a process because we deal with it more. Whereas at that elite level, Anthony Taylor probably doesn't have that process as much. So his process is his natural yellow card process, which is potentially a flash card, take the name, and maybe not isolate him.
Yeah.
So it's not wrong. He's done his process correctly, and that's what keeps him going. So it's all a big process, really.
Brilliant. So I think when we spoke about our levels, we're all operating at levels where sin bins are administered, right? So for those who are listening from different countries or at different levels, basically in England, I think it was last year, maybe the year before, last year, I believe, is when they decided to roll out sin bins across grassroots football. They define grassroots football as being step 5 in England and below the National League and the women's game. So sin bins for us now, or temporary dismissals, basically it give the referee it's a completely different process for managing dissent. Instead of giving a yellow card and the player continuing, the player receives a yellow card and has to take 10 minutes off the field. So really keen to understand how we manage dissent. When has sin bins for yourselves changed the way you manage dissent? Because all of a sudden, do you feel like it's a higher bar or a lower bar? What have your inputs been? And Matt, I know you've got some ideas or data from sin bins, so I'll let you start first.
Okay. You're right. It was the 2019-2020 season when it was fully rolled out. I know that I've got notes here. So the 2017-2018 season was when the FA started to trial it. And for the 2018-19 season, more leagues took the trial on board with the view that last season, that it was going to be fully implemented. So I've got some more notes in here which I can refer to if you want, but from my experience as a match official, I think you referenced that sort of bar, that tolerance as to where we go with dissent. I think I think it's sort of a meeting of the two in the middle where the players now know if they commit an act of dissent, it's not just a yellow card and a 10 quid fine 3 days later. It's you are out of the game for 10 minutes. You are potentially going to cost your team the win because they're a player short. So I think some of the referees' tolerance has gone up or down, but I think also the players now know what the instant implication is for receiving a yellow card for dissent.
Yeah. So there's almost like this whole guilt towards my team rather than a guilt towards my wallet, as previously, maybe. Yeah. Max, have you found, you said you're a level 7. How long have you been refereeing?
Since I was 14, so about 12 years. But I had
Yeah.
a break for work in between. But
Yeah, I remember.
yeah, I mean, the actual sin bin process, I think I agree with. I think it's working to a point. I haven't had too many of them. I've had a couple. But actually, you can see their own team get on that player's back to say, come on, you're letting us down. So like you say, the fines was there as an admin and a token gesture, but it wasn't high enough to be, for people to not do it. So I think the sin bin is a fair middle ground. I've had a couple and they work, and a couple of players say it's nice to see that referees are doing something about it. Now, so I think it's a good thing, and it's certainly helped with the management of that. And obviously, it's less than it has been. Each game is different, and it's how you manage it. But I certainly feel that it's making some impact, and obviously, only time will tell. The longer we're able to record the stats and see if it has actually improved or not.
So when it first came in for me, consciously or subconsciously, I always felt that 10 minutes off the pitch was a slightly higher punishment than a normal yellow card for dissent, right? And so probably the first few matches that I went about, and I'd always given yellow cards for dissent, maybe wrongly, maybe too much, but I definitely always was someone who would punish dissent should I felt it crossed that line, right? But when sin bins came in, I always felt that it was slightly higher a punishment. So my tolerance, I'd allow a little bit more because I always felt guilty that they'd lose 10 minutes of the game. Since those first few games, I've come back to my original position of what dissent is. So I always had that. I just felt, rightly or wrongly, that at least maybe the first couple of months, the players didn't really understand how big a punishment it was until it's happened. But what you said, which is really refreshing, and what I've witnessed since then, is the players are basically getting on each other's back and bringing that player down and managing it for you to a point where I hope it will start to eradicate dissent, right? That's the ultimate goal, because dissent doesn't really get you the win. Dissent is just a way of basically losing referees, in truth, right? So, John, how have you felt on the county league that you do? Sin bins been adopted, because that's the top level of where sin bins are able to be given. So, has dissent improved or not since sin bins have happened?
I think so. Yeah. When they first came in, I had to really, really concentrate because as we've discussed before, I'm notoriously card happy, and it used to get to a time where if I turned up and you got on the wrong side of it, I was sticking yellow cards up people's noses for fun. So now, obviously, think about it, does it actually warrant it? Is it dissent? Has everyone else heard it? Because you are punishing them. It's a stupid yellow to pick up anyway at the end of the day. Mm-hmm. But now they're sitting out for 10 minutes. And it does help because the captains understand it more, I think. Mm-hmm. They get to the player before. In my pre-match, I say to the captains, work with your team, you know them better than I do, so get on them before I have to. And they know that going a man down, even for 10 minutes, is massive. So the captains obviously help a lot with that dissent, I think, as well. So I think it's pushed other players to pick up their game, if that makes sense, and understand their roles better.
Yeah, and Yeah, so I guess the ultimate sense for us is sin bins are helping, they're working, and actually maybe giving us less work to do if the players are managing it themselves, which is great. My question now is, everyone's tolerance around dissent is different, right? You know, what some people might say a swear word directed at me isn't dissent, that's offensive, insulting, abusive language, it's going to be a red card. Some people might say if someone swears at me, it's a yellow card. And some people might say, actually, if it depends on who's heard it and a variety of different things. So what I'd love to understand, and I don't think we're going to go through all of the things that make dissent because there's a lot, but Max and Matt, maybe Matt, you start first. What do you think, how would you define dissent? Can you give us a few examples of what your levels would be?
I think in terms of gesture, I think those are relatively easy ones to find. So, you know, slamming the ball down, or kicking the ball away, or real big gestures that everyone can see.
Mm-hmm.
Ones where you say, well, hang on, you've clearly gestured at the referee. You give the referee the option or the decision to make whether you call. If it's something verbal, I would say every referee, the four of us here, we have different interpretations. I'm sure everyone listening will have different interpretations. So for me, if someone is absolutely screaming their head off from 40 yards away, that's, again, you are giving the referee the option.
Yeah.
That referee may or may not do it. They may choose to manage the situation. And for me, the really easy one, for me as a referee, is if you come running at me from 30 plus yards away and you absolutely scream your head off at me on a decision,
it's a yellow card.
That's an easy one. You are going to spend 10 minutes off. Mm-hmm. And obviously, I think we are all conscious now of what the impact of the sin bin has on the game. You've got, if a team that loses a player to the sin bin, it means they've got to get a bit more defensive.
Yeah.
The team that are an extra player up said, right, okay, let's take advantage of this. And I've seen it so many occasions where the scoreline has been turned on its head because of that 1 minute of daftness from a player. And I've seen it many occasions where basically at full time, when the teams do the debrief, they don't turn around and blame the referees anymore for us costing the game. They turn and look at the players who've had 10 minutes off.
Oh, that's great. Max, what about yourself in terms of other things around dissent? What does that mean? So gesture, I think, Matt, what you mentioned there was that was really interesting, is public versus private, right?
Yeah.
The public gestures need to be seen to be dealt with more because everyone can see it. You're kind of not given a choice there. Whereas a more private comment than gesture can be managed slightly different. So Max, do you want to talk about certain things?
Yeah, 100% agree with that, because, like you said, private chat, oh, come on, ref, didn't really think that was a foul or an offside or whatever. Privately is a separate a conversation and something that you can manage or say, or from my position, I felt, that such and such happened. But when you start making it public, and also it depends on the tone of voice, not just what they say, but the tone of how they say it, if it's aggressive or if it's just a normal conversation. So, sometimes before the sin bins, or even now, sometimes players like to make the game about the referee rather than themselves and the players. We don't question, well, your left back probably should have gone up the wing more and crossed it in or passed it. We don't question their tactics, and and I don't think they should question us either. We're here to allow a fun, a safe, and controlled environment for players to play. So they shouldn't need to do it. But I think that the gestures is a big thing, but also in the verbal communications, it's about the body language, the tone of voice, and what they say. And I think you can manage certain things, and there's other things where it gets a bit more where the only way that you feel to control that player is the sin bin approach. So yeah.
Brilliant. John, anything to add?
My approach is a little bit different. Like, I understand the public and private I seem to, out of habit now, tell players that's your final word. If they keep going on after that, at least the players have heard me say it. So I'll be like, you've had your word now, that's enough. And then, do you know what I mean? That could be a private chat, but it'd be private enough that people have picked it up, because obviously I'll put a hand out or something, be like, enough now. And then if they carry on, then they don't really give me much of a choice, because I've pre-warned them.
You've given them some rope to hang themselves.
Yeah, equivalently, yeah. The gesture stuff is the easiest one to give. The player throws the ball, the player throws his arms, he claps at you. That's my favourite one. Well done, ref. Like, cheers, thanks. You can have that. But yeah, the ones where you've got to pick them up privately first are a little bit more tricky, because it is on tolerance, isn't it? And if you're out in a team, do you go on my tolerance or do you go on your tolerance? Like, that's the big debate there, isn't it?
I think that's a great one, because you're going out as a 3, your assistants will have different tolerances, right? And this comes back to all the conversations we've had before, is tell me, if I'm the referee and I go over to my assistant, tell me what was said, and I'll have to deal with it on one level that's the same for everyone. I can't take your tolerance into account on this, and that's something that needs to be in the pre-match, etc. So some of the words I've written down as we've had this conversation I love checklists. I'm not saying this is the de facto checklist, but, public versus private. What's the temperature of the game? If the temperature is high, maybe you're more likely to give a card and quieting it down versus not. I don't know. What's the tempo of the game? Does the tempo make a difference in Dissent? If it's a slow game and nothing else has happened, you maybe could get away with a quiet word. I don't know. Tempo may be something to consider. What words are actually used? What are the words that have been used? Because if there are swear words in there, you need to make your own judgment of whether you find that Dissent or not. But then that kind of comes hand in hand with tone. You could not swear at me but have an aggressive tone, which leads to a yellow card, or you could swear with me with a fairly pretty friendly tone, and you might not get a yellow card, right? So it's words and tone together. Max, you mentioned body language, which was a prime example in this Anthony-Taylor incident, right? This kind of puffing out my chest and almost barging into Anthony-Taylor. So that these are things that we need to consider when it comes to Dissent, clapping, throwing the ball, gestures, etc. The one that no one mentioned, and I don't know if it forms into Dissent, and Matt, your background in discipline county FAs may help here, but I don't think we see it often at grassroots football, but I've always wanted to, because I would love to punish it, which is the imaginary wave of a yellow card. Does that class as Dissent, or is that something completely different?
I think I was going to potentially mention it, and it's a very difficult one, because are you making that gesture because you're trying to get your opponent booked, in which case that could be construed as unsporting, or are you gesturing that at the referee because the player feels that should have been a yellow card or a red card, saying, yeah, that should be a card, ref, that's a card, ref. So it depends on who the gesture is towards. I have seen it, and I have shown a yellow for it. Said, well, if you want the card, here you go, and that's at you.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's a fairly easy one. I mean, I've seen a clip of it in a rugby game, and the referee says, right, go over there a minute. Finishes talking, so says, if you come at me like that, yeah, there'll be a card, but it'll be at you.
Yeah.
And he makes it very clear.
Yeah, I don't think might have seen it once or twice in my whole career of hundreds of grassroots games. I don't think it happens really that much. John, Max, have you seen it much? Not really.
No, not me personally, no.
Would you class it as Dissent or unsporting behaviour?
I think, like Matt said, it really depends on the situation, but I think it is unsporting, really.
Yeah.
More because we like to see that competitiveness, but to purposely get someone else in trouble for your own benefit, I think is more unsporting than more Dissent.
Fair enough. So we've classified it there.
My question is, for this, to play devil's advocate, what is the difference between wave your hand as a gesture and being like that, and a player coming up to you screaming at that's a yellow card?
Yeah, there's not much.
No.
But do you know what I mean? That's your thought process there was all about the gesture, whereas 90% of the game will be a player makes a tackle and the first thing they do is come screaming for a card.
Yeah, it's something to think about.
I think because if I can add on this, I think if a player comes running at you and is telling you as the referee, that's that behaviour is aimed at you as the referee. So I think you could interpret that as dissent. I think with because it's the gesture, it's how you interpret it. So, basically, is he trying to get May booked or sent off, or is he making a gesture at you because you either haven't issued a card or you've issued a yellow when it should be a red? And it's like, no, ref, you've got that wrong. That should be this
Matt,
colour card.
I think your distinctions are completely correct. I think they're very hard to remember. You got a load of things to remember there. So if you are going to do it, the safety, you've just got to think through exactly what you've mentioned. So really interesting. So we're going to switch gears a little bit and move on to the second topic, which was in the Arsenal-Wolves match. So again, first half, a corner comes in and there was a completely innocent clash of heads between David Luiz and the Arsenal centre-back David Luiz and Wolves striker Raúl Jiménez. What ended up happening was Raúl Jiménez was in a very bad way, ended up having to have oxygen at the pitch, was taken directly to hospital and had a fractured skull and had an operation that evening. So a really bad outcome for him. Touch wood, fingers crossed everything goes well and he can recover quickly. David Luiz, on the other hand, again, the impact was completely kind of accidental. There was no fault on any of the players. Was obviously a little bit shaken up, but was allowed to continue after being examined by his physios and doctors, etc. One of the things that IFAB are looking into, and there is a big kind of amount of support for, is concussion substitutes. So I don't know the exact rules and kind of wording for the law. It hasn't really been documented anywhere, but there are definitely going to be trials around what a concussion substitute protocol would look like. Whether that's an extra substitute for a team to enable the swapping of a player who's been concussed or not, I'm not sure. But that's basically what it seems like it's going to be. So what I wanted to talk about first is head collisions. It's one of the first things that, the only things that you're meant to stop a game for. If there's a head collision, you're meant to stop the game, make sure that person's okay. But we're taking a lot of, our ultimate goal as referees is the safety of the players. But we're not educated. I don't think we're educated or giving enough education to detect or determine if a player has been concussed or not, right? That's not our role. So we're taking a lot of responsibility or a lot of advice from the doctors. So talk me through, have you ever felt a head collision in your games has led to concussion and a player's continued? And how do you feel about that as a referee? Because it makes me feel fairly uncomfortable. So I'm really keen to hear your thoughts. So Max, do you want to start?
Yeah, I mean, I've not really had it touch wood too much, but obviously the grassroots level and the non-elite level, we don't typically would get club doctors and high-level physios that will pick that up, and typically it will be players, coaches, managers, subs, and yourself. So there's not a lot of support at grassroots level to pick that up. The interesting thing I did find at the game is, although David Luiz carried on, he was substituted at half-time.
Yep.
So I don't know if that was tactical because they did swap him for another defender, or if that was because for the medical reason. I don't know. So I'm not 100% sure what that substitution was for, but it was interesting that they said he passed their concussion tests and then was substituted, and his head bandage was obviously weeping blood again. So that was an interesting
Yeah.
one, and I don't know why he was substituted.
John, do you have any thoughts on concussion?
I'm a bit like you, really. Actually, weirdly happened just before the lockdown. I think I discussed it with you. Some guy went up for a header, split his eye, taped it up. Luckily, we had a nurse there, like, so she knew what she was doing. But if this is a park game, like you say, I'm not a doctor, never been trained in concussion. It makes my life a lot more difficult for player safety because I can't judge if he's concussed or not because I don't know. I know a few symptoms. But he came on, and I remember he was like dry heaving, and like the ball was on a break as well. And I'm like half looking back, half looking forward, seeing if he's passed out, seeing if he's been sick on the pitch. It makes it really uncomfortable for you, especially like at that level, like at my level, at level 4, like we have physios that are trained in that. So it's one less thing for me to worry about.
Yeah.
But at like park football, where head injuries are probably more common than we think, it must be a nightmare.
And so on that situation, so was that a game where there were physios there? You said there was a nurse there, sorry, right?
Yeah.
After the point where he was dry heaving, was he allowed? Was he continuing? Did the team decide to substitute him, or what happened?
Yeah, so he subbed himself off because he was like, "Yeah, I don't feel right," but he'd like lost all the colour in his like face. But if there wasn't a nurse there, like the nurse was one of the guy's girlfriends, so like we were lucky. Like she taped it up, told him he needed stitches, so we were lucky in that case. But does it get to the point where you've got to tell him that I'm uncomfortable with you being on the pitch now, sub yourself off?
Yeah.
Because I was getting to that point. We played maybe only 5 minutes, and I was like, I'm spending more time with like a chip on my shoulder here than I am concentrating on the other 20 players on the pitch.
And that's basically what I want to get to is at the moment where there is no guidance for a referee there is nothing in the laws of the game that allows us to specifically stay like that player's concussed, he needs to go. How are you managing this? So Matt, has it ever happened to you, and what would you do in that scenario as law is today?
I have had that situation on a game about a couple of years ago where a player took the ball full speed right in the face, and he was out before he hit the deck, and you could see this was a bad one. But he regained consciousness, and he basically said, "Yeah, I'm happy to play." I could clearly see he had been knocked out, and I did not feel comfortable at all with him continuing. But I said to the other players, I said, "Ref, you can tell him to go off." I said, "I can't. There's nothing in the law that basically says I can say to him, you cannot continue. You must go off." I did say to the players and to his captain, "Look, if he has any problems, you must tell me straight away." In regards to obviously the main levels that I operate at, we're lucky if we've got a first aider on the team. But what also scares me is what happens if we have a youth player that is concussed, because that is I'm not saying concussion isn't as serious as such, but if you have a young player that's concussed and you could potentially have a young referee, 16, 17-year-old player refereeing that game, that's going to probably shake them up a fair bit. But also, would you want the referee of that age to be making a medical decision? Would you be wanting them to say, "No, you must go off," or "No, it's okay, you can stay on"?
Yeah, I completely understand where you're coming from here. And this is where sometimes players and managers are their own worst enemy, right? Because they want to play, they want to win, and win at all costs in some cases. So this is why I thought it's an interesting topic to discuss. I don't think there is a right answer here. I do look forward to seeing some change in law that says, referees, maybe even it's not something that referees are able to do, but it gives the teams the ability to make an extra substitution should there be a concussion. The question will be is, how does the referee validate that there is a concussion? Because, there needs to be, it could be used tactically, like any kind of piece of law. Sometimes it can be used tactically. So let's hope they can figure out a way in the wording to stop that happening. But on this, let's say the player continued. Matt, he did continue in your case.
Yeah, he did.
And John, let's say your player continued, and Max, let's assume you're the assistant on this game here. At what stage? Let's say all the subs have been used, the player is adamant to stay on, and the manager's adamant to stay on, but you can visibly see signs of issues. Is anything in your body saying, I need to stop this game, or I need to enforce this? Or are you really comfortable in saying, this is not my role, it's not my responsibility? It's a really personal question, but I'm keen to see what the differences are here. Who wants to start?
I'll jump in on this one then. For me, if there was something within the laws of the game that were to say a referee can prevent a player from continuing if there is a clear medical reason, so either concussion or a lot of blood pouring from a wound, something like that. If you can say, look, I'm not prepared to continue with this game unless this player is off the field. If they've used all the substitutions up, then perhaps have something within law that says if it's a concussion substitution, then let that happen. As it is at the moment, and I've had this several times when a player has had a really bad head injury, not necessarily a concussion, but it's like, I can see you're really not with it, but I can't force you to go off. And it then puts, if something then happens to that player, there's going to be come back on the referee, whatever happens, say, why didn't you ask that player to go off? I can't.
Yeah.
Especially when the referee should be looking after the safety of the players. That's our ultimate responsibility. It should allow us to have something in there to do something about it.
Yeah. But at the moment, would you? Because for me, and I might be completely wrong here, but I would be urging the manager, if there is a manager, to make, I'd be using words like, it's only a game, people have got work on Monday, families at home, let's make a correct decision here. And I'd be trying my hardest to persuade the players or the manager to make that change. But again, I might be wrong. Everyone listening might be saying, it's not your responsibility, you can't do that. But that is definitely something I would be looking to do if it was a visible issue. John, do you have anything to add on that?
No, I'd back you. In terms of like my conscience, I wouldn't feel comfortable, and like I know the manager would be like, it's not your place to say where my team, like how to run my team. I'd be like, I agree with that, but like my job is to look after your team, and I don't think he's right. Yeah. So I like, as bad as it sounds, I'd stop the game and be like, until this is sorted out, we ain't starting again. Like players break their legs, and it's a bit of a weird one because, like I said, players could break a leg and they just go down to 10 men regardless. Yeah. But so what would be the difference of just, if he'd broken his leg, you'd have no issue taking him off because he's not slightly dazed because he's concussed, he's not with it. Like he's probably not bringing value to your team anyway. Just get him off. Yeah. Or
I think the clear distinction that you've got there is a broken leg. You can physically see that. Concussion, you can't see it. Yeah. A player could be sat in front of you looking absolutely fine, but or he is displaying symptoms of a concussion. Yeah. And I think, to play devil's advocate for a minute, often we get on the grassroots football and with youth football, it's not a qualified referee that's refereeing the game. It might be a parent, it might be a team official. So if you leave it to the referee to decide if a player is concussed or not, that individual, who is a club referee essentially, could take advantage of it. Yeah. So it's a very tricky one to see where we go with that.
I think taking advantage could also happen if it was in the manager's side, right? Because they could just say, go up for a header and pretend you're her and come. So it's a delicate situation. I think you're right. Again, visibly, you can see a broken leg. You can't really see a concussion. But basically, the point of these podcasts is to have a discussion, get different views out there, not necessarily to make a decision or give people this is a direct way that you need to operate in this way, but hopefully for those listening and watching, you're starting to think about what happens if you in those situations, and how would you handle it? And maybe you agree with Matt, Max, John, or I, or maybe you disagree with all of us. But at least now you're maybe starting to think about what happens to your process in those situations, and that's the purpose of the podcast, and that's how I'm going to end it today. So, John, thanks for co-hosting. Matt and Max, thanks so much for being part of this week's podcast and vlog. We would love, as always, to have you back on in the future. Thanks so much for your topics, and maybe we'll get you on for a bit more of a fun discussion. Today was quite serious around Dissent and Concussion, but we'll get you on in the future too. So thanks for your time. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Matt.
And for those listening, this is we haven't done many pleas, but this is a plea from us that if you're watching on YouTube, give us a like, give us a subscribe. If you're listening on podcasts, wherever that is, Spotify or on Apple, give us a rating, give us 5-star rating if you please. Give us a little comment, and definitely share, as Peter Crouch would say, pass the pod, send it on to a friend, and we'll see you next week. Thank you very much.